Chapter 7. The same oddly transparent darkness that he had first seen while looking under the bush with Rocky now covered the whole town. He knew it was night and dark, but he perceived it as only being as dark as an early dusk. He still perceived colors that to his human eyes would have faded to shades of gray by this time of night. It would be his first time leaving his yard since he had returned home as a cat, and the quiet of the sleepy town made him more comfortable now than he had been when he walked home from his office with his bag in tow. Still, there's no sense in taking unnecessary chances with traffic or animals, he thought, and so he stuck to the shadows and traveled under bushes where possible. When he reached the old sandstone library, he went around the building to sniff at the ground where the news broadcast had shown the footprint. Even though the city had declined to pursue the case, the police had fortunately prevented anyone from walking around that particular spot with a bit of police tape stretched between some orange construction cones that still hadn't been removed. Jack patted under the tape and took a look at the footprint. Measuring himself against it, he supposed it was about 10 inches long. It left a nondescript sneaker tread imprint in the mud without any logo to make the brand obvious. This spot under the window was the only bare dirt around, as the rest of the dirt in the garden was overgrown by flowers and bushes, and the rest of the property within the boundary of sidewalks and streets was covered by well-watered lawn. He wouldn't be able to see another footprint without some bare ground for it to be left on. But I'm a cat now, he thought, so I don't have to rely on sight alone. He lowered his nose to the ground where the footprint was. It smelled like dirt. Surprise, thought Jack wryly. But as he moved his nose around the print a little longer and let the scent work its way through his awareness, he began to distinguish another smell apart from the dirt. Something like body odor, but not offensive. He sniffed around a wider area, picking up several similar odors, some with obvious chemical tags like body spray or deodorant, or more gentle floral scents like perfume. He supposed these belonged to the police and library employees who had been there earlier in the day. But none of them was exactly like the scent of the footprint, so he went back to it to fix it in his mind. He was no bloodhound, but he figured perhaps he was close enough. Working slowly, with his nose to the ground, Jack made an arc from the garden out into the grass and back to the garden, on the other side of the footprint, trying to pick up where the perpetrator had made his next step. But there were too many other scents mixed together, so he widened the radius of his arc, hoping that as he went further out into the lawn he'd be able to isolate the single path of the thief. About 15 feet from the first footprint, he managed to identify what seemed like a second. He hurried back to the first to confirm the match, then returned to the spot where he'd found the second. He moved forward a few feet, seeking the next step in a roughly straight line, and he found it a little to the left. He felt a rush of excitement. It's working. I'm doing it. He followed the scent trail across the lawn to the west, and lost it in the sterile cement and tire rubber scent of the parking lot. Hurrying across in roughly a straight line, he picked it up on the other side and followed it a few streets further west and south. At times, the trail cut across lawns and through backyards, so Jack carefully checked each area for a scent or other sign of dogs before proceeding. But the trail never required him to climb over a fence, which made him even more sure that he was following the right path. How could someone carrying a potted plant vault a fence? Finally, the trail led to the backyard of a house just off Main Street, about a quarter-mile away from the library. No one was in the yard. The whole yard smelled of the same person's scent, so Jack wasn't sure which way he or she had gone, but this was likely where the perpetrator lived, if he or she had spent so much time wandering around the yard. There was a shed toward the back corner of the yard, so Jack headed in that direction, thinking it would make a good place to hide something stolen. The shed was dark, but there were lights on in the house, behind the blinds and curtains that obscured the windows. With another look around, to be sure no one was watching him, Jack nosed open the door of the shed, which had been left open just a crack. Inside, the darkness was deeper and colorless, but Jack could still make out pretty distinct shapes. And the common feature of almost all these shapes was that they all looked like potted plants. Every horizontal surface in the shed, from the shelves to the top of the lawn-mower to every inch of ground, was covered in piles of potted plants, sometimes stacked in pyramids 4 and 5 levels high. Jack crept around examining the plants to see if he could find the asparagus fern that had been stolen from the library. Most of the plants were dead. Whoever had been liberating them obviously didn't care for them. They probably got no light at all in this shed, and most were so desiccated that they clearly hadn't had water in months. What's the point of all this, thought Jack. Who steals a bunch of plants just to let them die? He eventually found an asparagus fern that he assumed was from the library, but realized at that moment that he had no idea what he would do with it. He couldn't very well return it himself. Maybe an anonymous tip to the library or the police? They didn't seem too upset by its loss. Hadn't the librarian said he was glad it was gone? It doesn't even taste good, thought Jack as he absently nibbled at it, then gagged and spit out a bunch of leaf bits when he realized what he'd been doing. He smacked his lips and licked his fur a bit to get the nasty taste off his tongue, then hurried out of the shed. Noises from the house drew his attention. There was loud music blaring and raucous laughter. Jack crept across the yard toward the house, hoping to get a look at the culprit. The Venetian blinds in one of the windows had been damaged by something, leaving the end of one of the slats bent down and creating a gap Jack could peek through if he could just get up high enough. He leaped up on top of a trash can, and then crept along a brick ledge to the window. Craning his neck as high as he could, he still couldn't see in through the gap. He put a paw up to the window screen and let out his claws to get a good grip, then pulled himself up until he was standing on his hind legs, which finally allowed him a clear view into the room. There were 5 teenage boys inside, sitting on the floor, in a circle, eating junk food, and talking over each other. The oldest might have been 15, and the youngest couldn't have been older than 12. Jack pointed his ears toward them, and as he tried to hear them more clearly, the oldest spoke. "Your turn, Jimmy. Truth or dare?" "Dare," said one of the others, whose back was to Jack. "Okay, I dare you to steal a plant from the pizza place downtown." The boy called Jimmy rolled his head back and let out a groan. "Ugh. Dale, I'm sick of these stupid plant dares. Can't you think of something new? You almost got Chase caught yesterday. It's not even funny anymore." Dale, apparently the ringleader, scowled at Jimmy. "Well, what do you suggest? All you ever dare people to do is squirt mustard or ketchup or something else from the fridge up their nose. We're running out of new condiments to try." "Dare him to call up Olivia," yelled one of the other boys, and they all erupted in laughter. Jack rolled his eyes and climbed down from the window. He should have expected as much. There was no mystery behind the plant theft, just a bunch of idiot teenagers with nothing better to do and not enough supervision. Sounds about like me and my friends at that age, he thought with a grin. I'm not going to turn these guys in to the police. Maybe just scare them straight. Trotting back toward the shed, he studied the ground and found that the dirt in front of the shed was packed flat and grassless by foot traffic. But it was moist enough that it made a perfect riding surface for his claw. It was the work of just a minute for him to scratch out a warning to the boys. "I know you stole the plants. Return them or I call the police." Satisfied with his work, Jack looked once more at the windows of the house, laughter pouring out again. He felt a pang of loneliness remembering the good times he'd had with friends in high school and in college, and he regretted that he hadn't made any friends here in Amherst. Not much chance of it now either, he thought, and padded down the house's driveway toward the sidewalk. A bit of a short chapter today, but thanks for stopping by to join me, and we'll continue tomorrow with Chapter 8.